It remains one of the points of contention among readers. Many, even those who enjoyed the Twilight Saga, found Bella lacking as a protagonist. Many have described her as a Mary Sue, a character who is flawless and therefore boring. While Kristen Stewart did, in my opinion, a good job bringing the character to life, Bella certainly could have used more development. Moreover, the character had potential. With more time, the ingredients for an engaging heroine were there. Whether it's Bella's voracious reading habits, her messy childhood, her snarky remarks, or her mental health, there are elements of Bella's personality which could be interesting if they'd only been explored. Before we continue, I'm Riley and this is Otherworldly Fiction. On this channel, I talk about fantasy books, discuss characters and lore, offer my bookish opinions, and share the occasional writing advice. If any of that sounds like your cup of blood, hit that subscribe button. Posts are on Fridays. If you're a writer looking to improve your own characters, someone who's planning to write a Twilight fanfiction, or just a reader who wants to understand where Bella went wrong, there are a number of ways to fix Twilight's so-called Mary Sue. Bella's character can be lifeless and dull, but when looking at what traits she did have, one sees the potential. By building on those elements in her character which are already present, we find several ways Twilight's protagonist can be fixed. Number 1. Bella's backstory. Even those who have only watched the films know the basics of Bella's backstory. When she was quite young, her parents split, and her mother took her to live in various sunny climes. Meanwhile, though raised by her mother, Bella would spend summers in Forks so that she could have something of a relationship with her dad. The story within the novels is the same, but readers are given a few more details. First of all, Renee can be irresponsible. Leaving bills unpaid and struggling to cook half-decent meals, it fell to a young Bella to keep everything functioning. Secondly, Charlie continued to love Renee, as evidenced by the fact he never repainted his house, something Bella notices and is unnerved by. Now, the idea of divorced parents is hardly revolutionary, but it offers emotional ground worth exploring. Plus, the dynamic Bella has with each of her parents is also intriguing, particularly as it relates to how her personality was shaped and how she struggles. On the surface, Renee is a fun and happy-go-lucky parent, but if one reads between the lines, there is something off in the relationship. On reading Bella's backstory, Renee's carelessness is further detailed. Renee forgets such basics as purchasing groceries, paying the bills, and disciplining her daughter. As such, from an early age, Bella is left to pick up the slack. Bella learns to pay bills, cook, and persuade her mother out of dangerous situations, while she's still in elementary school. Although this causes Bella to be mature for her age, and to grow into a responsible person, it's hardly fair. Bella, in looking after her mother, is essentially placed into the role of caregiver. Their roles reversed, Bella is parentified, which, if you've read any psychology papers, is a bad thing. With the exception of dating advice, Renee doesn't attempt to wield any authority over Bella, and she never apologizes for leaving her young child to pick up the loose ends. Plus, Bella actually feels guilty for leaving her mother alone, because she's concerned she won't be capable of looking after herself, a concern no child or teen should have. It's not until Phil steps in that Bella feels comfortable leaving her mother, and even then, she does so out of a desire to please her mother rather than herself. It's great to want to compromise for someone else. The problem is, Bella is always the one compromising. By being placed into the role of parent, Bella learned to place her mother's needs before her own. Ultimately, this led to her sacrificing herself in other situations, whether it was her safety in interacting with vampires or her desire to die in her mother's place. It could be argued that Renee has instilled in Bella an unhealthy complex. Edward often chides Bella for being reckless, for not taking her safety seriously, or for throwing herself into dangerous situations. But perhaps Renee is to blame for Bella's penchant for flinging herself into deadly situations. Bella never learned to place herself first, and this aspect of her character is caused by the dynamic she shared with her mother would have been worth seeing. In reading between the lines, and seeing where Renee failed as a parent, Bella's actions, such as jumping off cliffs or hanging out with vampires, make sense. These sides of Bella and Renee were there, but needed to be further revealed for readers to understand Bella and the strange relationship she shared with her mother. Number 2. Mental health struggles. Readers, if they don't find Bella boring, find her a little, crazy. She makes bad, some might say stupid, decisions, and seemingly for little reason. However, if one reads the books, something becomes clear. Mentally, Bella isn't necessarily in a good place. There's Bella's awkwardness, of course. Her being an introvert and struggling to relate to people is in itself a problem because she's often left alone. While Bella doesn't seem to mind her loneliness, all human beings need social interaction if they want to retain their mental health. When Bella falls for Edward, he doesn't just become her boyfriend. He becomes her whole world because she's unable to grow close to anyone else. Relying on one person to provide meaning and affection in her life, Bella was understandably gutted when Edward left. After all, he wasn't just breaking up with her. He was also taking away Bella's outlet to be social and feel someone was looking after her. As noted in my last point, Bella always had to look after her mother. Edward was the first person who wanted her to look after herself, and in losing him, Bella lost both her sense of security and the relief that someone else was looking after things for a change. Of course, Bella's problems don't stop there. If we look at her reactions throughout the book, it seems clear, at least to me, that Bella has anxiety. Left to handle all responsibilities as a child, Bella was left to worry about everything. Consequently, she grew into an anxious adult, struggling to breathe, hugging herself, and experiencing restless sleep. Bella isn't mentally healthy. Neither of her parents seem to express concern over her mental health until it reaches an extreme. But it could be argued that they laid the groundwork for those problems in the first place. By the second book, in the wake of Edward's departure, Bella also has depression. She shifts between wanting to scream and feeling numb. She has nightmares and poor sleep, and she avoids social interaction, staying at home and avoiding her friends. These are all textbook symptoms of depression, and Bella's behavior points to something worse than heartbreak. It suggests she was troubled to begin with. Her reaction to Edward's leaving reveals a personality which was already troubled before Edward's interference. Moreover, if anxiety and depression weren't bad enough, Bella also shows symptoms of psychosis. Whether this is an indication of schizophrenia or a stress-induced episode of hallucination, it's a serious problem which is largely glossed over. In the films, Bella hallucinates seeing Edward, while in the books, her delusions are auditory. However, it should be noted that this distinction matters little. In looking at the symptoms of schizophrenia, hallucinations can be visual or auditory. In other words, one is as bad as the other. Whichever version of the story you follow, Bella has psychosis, and nobody wants to talk about it. Personally, Bella's mental health struggles are one of the parts I actually find interesting about her character. Her inability to relate to others, her intense anxiety, her battle with depression, and her chronic nightmares are real issues people suffer from, and would have been exciting to explore. The trouble is, the Twilight Saga doesn't explore Bella's problems, and that's a shame because the groundwork is laid. By delving into Bella's struggles, her character could have been made more relatable to teens or young adults grappling with similar issues. By actually addressing that Bella has and suffers from mental illness, her character could have been given more depth. As readers, we could have explored why Bella was anxious. We could have seen discussions around Bella's more obsessive behaviors and around her extreme reactions. Even if it was just Charlie trying to drag Bella into therapy, it would have been great to see Bella's problems validated. Plus, learning how Renee might have caused mental problems for Bella would have given us a different side to not only Renee's character, but the relationship she shared with her daughter. Number 3. Hobbies. Part of what makes Bella boring is her lack of interest in, anything. While this could have been attributed to her having depression, an issue in itself which wasn't explored enough, it's worth noting that Bella has one interest. She loves to read. Moreover, Bella loves plays and classical literature. Wuthering Heights is one of her favorite books, and she's familiar with the works of both Shakespeare and Jane Austen. Unfortunately for readers, Bella doesn't express her interests enough. Even if the author couldn't give her other hobbies, except perhaps a love of riding motorcycles, the interest she did have should have been emphasized. When sitting with her friends or the Cullens, Bella should have been talking about books. She should have been asking Edward and Alice what their favorite books were, and she should have been extolling the virtues of Jane Austen or Shakespeare. Bella could have had a playful argument with Jessica or Angela about Heathcliff. She could have discussed what her favorite or least favorite parts of Romeo and Juliet were, and why. Edward and Bella do discuss Wuthering Heights slightly, but their discussions could have been deeper and more frequent. This is one of Bella's favorite books. She should be talking about it more and attempting to understand why it means so much to her. What does Bella identify with when it comes to the classics? Is it the moody atmosphere? Is it the brooding anti-heroes? Again, Bella should be talking about books. In fact, if Twilight had taken place a decade later, I'd argue she should be doing what I'm doing, starting a YouTube or blog where she can rant about books and obsess over the psychology of characters nobody else really cares about. Midnight Sun, the retelling of Twilight from Edward's perspective, does solve this problem to a degree, by giving Bella a chance to list her favorite books, her preferences for movie adaptations, and so on. We see more of her character. As a result of these discussions, readers of Midnight Sun felt Bella had more personality. In Midnight Sun, we learn that Bella enjoys Anne McCaffrey, and that she prefers the BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. An opinion I agree with. It's hard to hate someone who likes Colin Firth. Of course, readers needed more. If Bella's one hobby had been explored, whether in an obsessive need to arrange her bookshelves or in a desire to analyze Heathcliff, and possibly her own interest in moody bad boys, readers would have felt closer to her. At the very least, exploring Bella having a crush on Heathcliff might have made her attraction to Edward more understandable. Even if readers didn't like Edward, they'd have been able to relate to where Bella was coming from. Number 4. Attitude. In the books, Bella has some attitude. The problem is, we don't see enough of it. She can be scrappy when she wants to be, and she's not afraid of making a snarky retort or two. But when it comes to Edward, she's mostly, too friendly. The beginning of Bella and Edward's relationship is actually more intriguing because of their quarreling. Edward makes vague remarks, and Bella calls him out on it. Later, though, Bella assumes a resigned attitude. Dejectedly going along with Edward's schemes or pouting, she does little to challenge him. This is a girl who's chill with dating vampires and riding motorcycles. The fact is, Bella needed to fight with Edward more. This might sound counterproductive to an epic romance, but a flirtation that's all smiles and kisses is boring. A memorable romance has tension, and, realistically, any couple who's been together long enough fights. Plus, seeing Bella put Edward in his place would have been satisfying. Unlike Bella, Edward does have his flaws, and Bella should have made him answerable for them. By tolerating Edward's shortcomings without complaint, and going along with everything, however reluctantly, Bella failed to express herself. Readers needed to see more snarky comments, more resistance, and more criticism. They needed to see Edward ease off as Bella put her foot down. and they needed to see a girl who could stick up for herself. Bella didn't have to be a superhero, but when Edward did something she disagreed with, she needed to argue. Instead of giving in, she should have fought him until he either A, learned to behave himself, or B, she gave up and dumped his ass. In other words, Bella needed to pull a Feyre and make Edward work for her forgiveness. After being dumped and thrown into a depression, Bella, even if she took Edward back, should have had some reprimands for the misguided vampire. In conclusion, audience reception to Bella's character ranged from lukewarm toleration to absolute hate, but it didn't have to be that way. In dissecting her character, there is a personality to be found, and one with potential, but anything which might have made Bella interesting was ultimately underutilized. Whether it was her less than ideal childhood, the divorce of her parents, her occasionally smarmy remarks, or her multiple mental health problems, Bella had the potential to be an engaging character. There were several aspects of the personality and backstory she did have that would have been exciting to unravel, but which were instead glossed over. Bella could have been a protagonist with attitude. She could have given those readers struggling with mental health someone to identify with. She could have been a gateway into exploring the issue of parentifying your child. She could have been relatable to teens whose parents had divorced. And if nothing else, she could have been an enthusiastic bookworm worthy of being invited into any club. Using the traits already inherent to her character, Bella could have been improved. Alas, much of what made her character interesting to me was largely ignored. Whether you're struggling to make your protagonist's personality leap off the page, or hoping to improve Bella yourself via a Twilight fanfiction, these are 4 ways Bella's personality could have been improved. What is your opinion of Bella? Are there any aspects of her personality you would have liked to see further explored? Is there another Twilight character you'd prefer to see as the protagonist? Sound off in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and happy reading!